I'm sure it will read. It should. It's gonna be this really exciting to have community. Almost one of I think it worked good. I think it's not too awesome, but it's way to do it.
Usually I talk about what
You want to handle this
There we go. So close. I live so you can see ski resorts and colleges where you can I know the drill. Hey, thanks for doing this. Did you know we're live? Partner, we'll give you the feed, you can cut and edit it, and I will kick it off, and I'm going to pick up before that, yeah, we need something to mention. Oh, no. We used to work with
Another older Rick Walden's. I'm lucky to have the rest of you.
We're trying to fix your Xbox problem. I think we're close.
Okay. Yeah. Which is our Xbox problem?
I guess my name's right there.
James, I know.
Okay, well, appreciate it.
Ever give me the high sign, we're ready to go? We're ready to go. Hi, everybody. I'm Daryl Henry, Executive Director of the Western Caucus Foundation. Welcome to one of our DC Connect briefings. And this is kind of the medium we get to talk to folks throughout the country. So this will be live streamed as well as posted up on our website for folks to be able to tune in and view. We have lots of supporters across the country. They can't all be here in DC. So we like to bring DC to them a few times a year. And one of the key issues that have just been, talked about a lot lately, so we thought we'd bring this together. We do a lot of work on the energy space. We're seeing data centers and AI deployed throughout the West, and it's bringing some challenges as well as amazing opportunities for our country. So we thought we'd bring in some policymakers and some folks from industry to have a discussion on where that nexus is of challenges and opportunities and where we're government we need to go. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay Obernolte, one of the members of the Western Caucus.
Thank you very much. We get to be here talking about a couple of my favorite subjects, which are artificial intelligence and energy. We're really serving in an interesting and unique time because on the one hand, we've got this burgeoning field of AI that is going to potentially bring some really positive changes to not just our economy, but our society, but it also brings its own challenges with it. And when it comes to the intersection of AI and energy, you can make a really pessimistic case and you can make an optimistic case, right? You can, on the pessimistic side, you can point out the fact that we've got these data centers that are going to create a demand for many gigawatts, if not terawatts of energy. And we have a grid that is currently completely unsuited to providing that energy. We don't do enough generation even to meet our existing wind load. You add the AI data center load on top of that, it makes the problem even worse. We've got a lot of consumers who are worried that all of this added demand and load for AI data centers is going to create a scarcity of energy that increases prices for everyone. And that's in an era when energy prices have already been increasing. In fact, it's my home state of California. The rising cost of energy is one of the key things that's driving the increase in poverty and the fact that we have the highest poverty of any state in the country. A lot of that's energy related. So that's the pessimistic case. The optimistic case is two things. First of all, these data centers, they know their energy demands. A lot of times they're bringing generation along with them. Sometimes it's cogen where they're generating it on site. Sometimes it's generation that's on site, but they're over generating and they're exporting the surplus to the grid. Sometimes there are deals with our local utility providers that provide the capital for energy providers to build new generation. So you can make a case that actually all of this focus on generation and transmission is not going to increase the cost of energy. It's actually going to decrease the cost of energy. And then you can talk about the fact that artificial intelligence itself can help in the solution to some of these generation and transmission problems by smarter grid management, by optimization of load, by optimization of storage, by optimization of transmission. That AI itself is part of the solution to this problem. So that's why this conversation we're having right now is so important to the future of just not AI dominance by America, but the future of energy prosperity in our country. So thank you very much for being part of this discussion. I'm really looking forward to comments from my colleague, Congressman Downer, but also the comments from our panelists and answering your questions.
Thanks, sir. Congressman Downer.
Well, first of all, Daryl, thank you for doing this, and thanks to the Western Caucus Foundation for putting this together. I really appreciate having a seat at the table and talking about this, and thank you for your comments, Congressman Obernolte. AI is something that I'm very excited about. I think of the opportunities we have and how exciting this next generation is. I mean, it's very transformational technology that none of us have seen in our lives before. It's also pretty scary. It's like, where does it go? Where do you put, reasonable sideboards so that you are doing what you need to do, but not stifling innovation and making sure that we are leading in innovation in this country. And I think we're really a pivotal moment in technological history. And the rapid adoption of AI has led to questions of everything from intellectual property, privacy, security, what that's going to do. And then as it develops, one of the things that I think about often is, where's humanity's place in this whole thing? Where are the poets and philosophers, and where's all that come in terms of as this grows? But I'm very excited, and coming from a technology background, seeing where we've come is pretty exciting for me. The other thing, I represent a very rural district, and thinking about where this conversation deals with impacts on rural communities, including central and eastern Montana, and how we can really set up the AI industry for future success. One of the biggest things that I think about is a limiting factor in being able to lead and succeed in this AI race, which I really, kind of equate to a modern arms race. I mean, it really is a very meaningful race, and I think that if we don't win, we're going to be incredibly disadvantaged on the world stage. But one of the biggest limiting factors we have on this is, how do we power it? How do we make sure that we are, generating, not just generating, but transmitting the energy that we need to be able to be competitive? And Congressman Obernolte, mentioned some stuff about co-locating generation and doing some other things. But I think one of the things we need to keep are focused on is the requirement for, not just generating, but also transmitting this energy that is reliable baseload. And a lot of folks, I was actually in a conversation with the CEO of NVIDIA recently, and Jensen Huang, and he was talking about some of these issues with energy requirements, and somebody said, "Well, we need more subsidies for alternatives." And you're like, "No, we need to start making sure that we have that we're capitalizing on the energy under our feet right now. Make sure that we have reliable base load, so that we can continue to keep this, because data centers are not going to be able to go up and down when the sun's shining or the wind's blowing. I mean, we need to make sure that we're generating that, and we cannot, under any circumstances, ignore the energy that's right underneath our feet. Montana, we pull a lot of coal out of the ground. Natural gas is another part of that. We have, hydro in Montana, and, the other big conversation, which, is not necessarily the cheapest or quickest, is we need to really keep thinking about what we're going to do, what our nuclear policy is going to be. Small modular reactors, how we build that. But I've got a couple of just bullet points here, I just want to put out here, is just the demands for power. Each AI query takes about 10 times the electricity of a traditional web search. So when you start to think about these huge data centers and all building these neural networks and having to process these questions about 10 times, and some of these models like ChatGPT process over 2.5 billion of these queries a day, and that's not going to slow down. That's going to keep growing. And I think about some of the largest hyperscale data centers that require over 100 megawatts of energy. 100 megawatts. That's enough power, energy to power hundreds of thousands of homes. I mean, you just think about that requirement. Total electricity consumption in U.S. data centers is expected to reach over 400 terawatt hours by 2030. Put that in perspective, this is roughly equivalent to the energy consumed by the entire country of Japan. I mean, to put things into perspective. And so, I alluded to this before, we need resilient energy resources. AI has accompanied infrastructure, requires around-the-clock power, lapses in supply, lead to data loss, hardware damage, service outages. And I already mentioned the issues with intermittent green technology. I don't want anybody to get me wrong, I'm an all-of-the-above guy, but we need to make sure that we have reliable base load, and we need to grow that as quickly as we can. And we have to develop this energy beneath our feet because our opponents in this, our adversaries who aren't always friendly with us, they're not going to put any roadblocks in there. And I want to talk about the elephant in the room is competing with China, because China is doing everything they can to lead in this race. And one of the things that you'll find in China is they're not putting any regulatory or permitting roadblocks in developing energy. I mean, they will put it up a lot faster than we can, which one of the reasons I think that permitting reform is so important in the United States. Make sure that we can get things to market quickly. Make sure that we're not just building this the ability to generate, but also the ability to transmit. And China understands the foundation that whoever wins the energy race will win the AI race. They understand that. They'll put no roadblocks into that development. And so that's one of my big concerns. They're pouring massive amounts of private capital into energy projects, focusing on coal, natural gas, and both fission and fusion technologies. And I humbly offer that I believe that we must respond in kind and be equally ambitious, equally coordinated, and decisive. If we're going to beat China and seize this critical strategy advantage that is AI, Congress must act. And I think there's a lot of energy in Congress to act. And one of the issues, like I mentioned, lead times for energy and infrastructure projects bogged down by duplicative agency policies, serial litigants. That's another big one that is always kind of a thorn in my side. Issues with footing the bill, resulting in capital expenditures ballooning to numbers businesses are unhappy to pay. And I'll just say that Congress, in its first steps of passing much needed permitting reform and energy legislation, this is not the end. We must ensure the U.S. business community has the tools that it needs to deploy critical infrastructure for artificial intelligence. And if we can power the insatiable energy needs, the needs of AI, and the resulting dividends, they're going to pay back tenfold. And we can't stay ahead of this. We need to be committed. Congress needs to be committed to make sure that we are putting the resources out there so that we can compete. AI optimizations have the ability to impact every sector we know, including energy, agriculture, healthcare, financial services, and many others. And to accomplish this, U.S. must lead innovation. And I'm talking about this in so many different things where we put in roadblocks that pushes innovation offshore. We saw that obviously with digital currencies, and we saw what happened when folks didn't want to develop and innovate in the United States. And we've seen some of that blow up. So we need to make sure that we have, again, those sideboards that are, in a reasonable spot that people want to develop here. So that innovation is happening in the United States and not being offshore. We don't have, the craziness like we had, a couple of years ago with companies like FTX. Make sure that we are having it here. We're putting those reasonable sideboards in. I probably talked too long already in my opening comments, so I'm just going to end here. I'm really excited that, thank you, Daryl, thank you for the Western Caucus for bringing this issue up, because I think this is probably one of the most meaningful things that we're going to work on in our lifetime, because this is going to change. This is going to change the way we live our lives, the way we do business, the way we do business. This is going to be an incredible tool set, and we need to be very thoughtful on how we innovate, how we stay ahead in this race, how we power it, and how we educate folks on how this can help them move into this next phase of what we do in technology. And on that, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I yield.
Thank you, sir. And we'll go to our panelists now, and we'll start with Suzanna Steele, Crusoe, Manager of Government Affairs and Local Policy. So, Suzanna.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you to the Western Caucus Foundation for putting this together. Thank you, Representative Obernolte, Representative Downing, for your time. So I just want to quickly start with Crusoe. Who are we? So we are an energy-first AI infrastructure company that operates vertically integrated. So that means that we build every layer of the stack. We have manufacturing sites in the United States, as well as a cloud product that is deployed across the United States and overseas. But most importantly, we are building data centers to power the AI revolution. So if you've heard of Project Stargate, our site in Abilene, Texas is 1.2 gigawatts. That was announced about a year ago, and then announced again by President Trump in January. So I think that the congressmen really did represent well what we're facing here in terms of the boom of AI and how we're going to power it. What is specific about Crusoe is that we take an energy-first approach, which means we look for the stranded energy. That's how we found our West Texas site in Abilene, Texas. There was Lancium Clean Campus had stranded wind energy, and so we were able to actually come in, build that site, and help balance the rates so that they were able to make money and then further develop their wind. But as we all know, this is going to be an all-of-the-above approach, and so some of our other sites takes that. For example, we announced a 1.8 gigawatt site in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that is going to be natural gas powered with the option of carbon sequestration. And so it really is a perfect site because you have the Rocky Mountain Pipeline Express coming from the Appalachian Basin in southeast Ohio all the way to the Green River Mountain Basin in Wyoming, and that means that we can tap into that resource there, and then that gas stays in Wyoming and it's community Wyoming. So those are just some of the projects that we have, but I'm really excited to be here today, and I really thank you both for your leadership on this subject, because it's clear that this is going to be the next 10 years of policy and how we reform, how we work on things such as permitting to make sure that we can build responsibly.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Andrew Malcolm, Constellation Energy, Vice President, Federal Government Affairs.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here, and thank you to Congressman Downing and Congressman Obernolte for hosting us here today. I'm Andrew Malcolm with Constellation. I'm thrilled to be here with the Western Caucus because I'm originally from South Florida, which is about as far from the West as you can get, still being in the United States. But my first job on the Hill was with Congressman Greg Walden, who represented Eastern Oregon for many years. When I started working for him, I didn't know the difference between a spotted owl and a sage grouse, or know what the Antiquities Act was, but I spent 8 years working for him, so I'm a Westerner at heart. Yeah, so that's why I'm excited to be here. Constellation, we're one of the largest electricity generators in the country. The backbone of our generation fleet is America's largest commercial nuclear fleet. We're about to close on our acquisition of Calpine Corp, who's the largest generator of electricity from natural gas and geothermal. Once we do that, hopefully in a few weeks, we'll have over 60 gigawatts of generation capacity. We'll be the largest, one of the largest generators of electricity in the world. So it's a really exciting time to be in the energy business, especially with nuclear as our backbone. 5 years ago, if we were sitting here, we'd be having a very different conversation about the nuclear industry and I think energy in general. In the 2010s, in this country, we shut down 13 nuclear reactors before the end of their license life. Half of the fleet was threatened, and there's just been a sea change in the past 5 years where we're talking about not only do we need to keep every megawatt we have on the grid, but how do we add new megawatts to the grid, especially reliable baseload power like we get from nuclear. So at Constellation, we're doing a lot of that. We're keeping the fleet open that we have. We're extending the life, hopefully, of our entire fleet well into the 2070s and beyond. We're making upgrades at many of our sites to generate more nuclear from the existing plants that we have, something called upgrades. We believe that's one of the quickest and cheapest ways to get new nuclear megawatts on the grid. We're restarting the Chris Crane Clean Energy Center in Pennsylvania through a partnership we have with friends at Microsoft, formerly known as 3 Mile Island. That reactor we shut down in 2019 because it was challenged by economic conditions. We're going to bring that back online as soon as 2027 to bring 835 megawatts to the grid. And we're looking at new nuclear, like a lot of people are, and how you use the know-how, the supply chain, the workforce of the existing fleet to get new nuclear built in this country. So it's an exciting time and excited to talk about it.
Great, thank you. And last panelist, Suhail Khan, Microsoft Director of External Affairs.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Daryl. Thanks to the Western Caucus Foundation. Thanks to all of you guys. I'm also a former House staffer, so I appreciate your time is valuable. At least you got some lunch. But we'll have some information that might be helpful to you and your bosses. But yeah, absolutely want to echo already what's been said by Congressman Obernolte, Congressman Downing, Suzanna, and Andrew, that it is definitely an interesting time with AI. AI, is general purpose technology. Different technologies that have come in the past are very specific for very specific use cases. AI is a little different. It's like electricity. It's something that can be used for across the board for a whole host of purposes. And with that, you have a whole revolution when it comes to a lot of different things. I was on a panel, a lot of areas. I was on a panel a couple weeks ago with an oncologist up in Sacramento, California. He's been in practice for over 2 decades, and he uses AI to detect precancerous cells in mammograms that he misses with his naked eye. So this is life-saving, right? You're hearing about the breakthroughs that are occurring in the pharmaceutical arena and transportation, and with all that change that's occurring with AI, as has already been said by my co-panelists, is the demand for energy to power that revolution, and that has its challenges. So as Andrew said, we're excited to partner with Constellation and bring the facility in Pennsylvania back online. We'll be the first major tech company to partner with a nuclear facility, hopefully as early as 2027. Things look good so far. As Andrew rightfully said, it's going to be 835 megawatts of energy. So that's going to be much more than what we'll be using to power our needs and the needs of our consumers and our customers. And so that means there'll be more energy into the grid, which, as the congressman mentioned, will bring the cost down for consumers. And the way we're approaching this infrastructure challenge, whether it's here in the United States or indeed around the globe, is that yes, there are going to be challenges. Farmers are worried about the water concerns. Others are concerned about the land that's being acquired, the energy that's going to be acquired and used. Is that going to have a negative impact upon those that live in that neighborhood? So the Microsoft approach is really to come in and be a net positive to a particular community. So, for example, with the Constellation partnership, one of the main drivers for us there was that we would bring more energy into the grid, thereby bringing up the supply for consumers in that given geographic area, and thereby bringing the cost down. So that's a net positive. Not to mention all the jobs that will be associated with that, the tax revenue, which I'm always kind of shaking on because I don't want to just do taxes. But either way, if we can get more tax revenue to the state and local, that's all for the better. The same goes for the water usage. Right now, we're operating. I know some of these guys are engineers here that have members' pins, but we have a closed loop when it comes to the water usage. So effectively, for any given facility, it's about 4 Olympic-sized pools of water that's used to cool these facilities, and that's a closed loop. So you're not having to bring in new and water and exacerbate water challenges in a given geographic area, particularly in the drier states like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. And so right now, we are in a situation now where we have 3 kind of super AI, super factory facilities, one in Wisconsin, one in just outside Atlanta, Georgia, and then one in Iowa. We're building more as the demand is there. This is a business case that we're making. But as we do that in particular geographic areas, we're trying to be very sensitive to the energy, the water, the land use, so that, again, the neighbors there rightfully have concerns with a big company like Microsoft coming into the neighborhood, that they see in the end it's a net positive for the energy consumption, for the land use, the responsible land use, for the water consumption, the stewardship there of resources, and then of course bringing the jobs and the revenue to that geographic area. So that's generally our approach. There's going to be challenges going forward. Congressman Downey talked about guardrails. We're very much operating from learning some of the negative lessons that we learned from a generation ago when it comes to the social media revolution. That was when the social media companies kind of came online as the world. It was all rainbows and unicorns. And nobody saw around corners to see this is going to be a playground for child predators, this is going to be all the scam artists that are going to come, that's where people are going to come to scam our grandparents and kids. Not to mention all the nation-state actors like Russia, China, North Korea that are attacking, private government sectors. So that's why now, while Congress puts in place guardrails and state and local legislators come together and put in guardrails to protect the most vulnerable communities, elderly, children, etc. In the meantime, we feel it's incumbent on a company like Microsoft that we voluntarily put in guardrails on our own to govern our technology, that we can't just put technology out into the arena and then walk away, that we have to be very thoughtful. The congressman meant, poets and philosophers. That's why we're not just relying on engineers, responsibility to respect lawmakers for the parameters. We're also going to, I don't know about poets, because I'm a Berkeley grad, so I hold in kind of low regard, but we are going to theologians, we're working with the Vatican and other religious leaders, working with Catholic University and others to try and not only bring engineers and lawmakers to the table, but also people that have a broader philosophical, faith-based, moral compass when it comes to these issues, and that includes energy, land use, and water consumption. So I'll pause there. Look forward to the conversation and your questions.
Great, Suhail. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Dr. Obernolte to lead off the questions.
Right, so lots to unpack there, but we've got the right panel to do it. I want to first ask about something that Congressman Deming brought up, which is, the all of the above philosophy for energy generation. So I'm interested in what the panel thinks about the various sources of generation. Like question number one, can we rely on renewables, and what degree can we rely on renewables, given the fact that AI data center is all base load? I mean, we need that reliable energy, and we need it 24/7. It doesn't seem well suited to renewables, so maybe you have to pair it with storage. What role do we think renewables play in this energy mix when it comes to data centers?
Yeah, look, it is all of the above approach. At Crusoe, we think about this as an R&D mission. So, for example, we have a site out in Nevada, Sparks, Nevada, where we use microgrids and then battery storage. And these are little modular data centers, right? So you can even put one right next to your AI application for latency. And so you can scale a data center's gigawatt to the power that you can bring, and that can be renewable. In that case, it is renewable. I think we view this as a mix. We view this as we're experimenting with, could you think about doing geothermal and nuclear at one site? And so I think Congressman Downey's point of there is a great baseload of power right beneath our feet, and that should not be ignored. And that's an example by our site in Cheyenne, Wyoming. But also, we see the demand. We know that there is huge infrastructure and capital behind renewables. So let's use it to our advantage, and let's make sure that we can really take an all of the above approach.
Yeah, I agree. I think competition has to win out here. So I'm an evangelist for nuclear. Nuclear is reliable. It operates in all sorts of weather, 24/7. It can go 18 to 24 months between refueling cycles. Not every customer who we work with, we generate the electricity and we sell it to customers. Not every customer we work with needs 5.9 reliability and needs to be running 24/7. So we're working with customers on renewables and storage. We're working on grid flexibility where they may ramp down some of their operations in times when grid usage is very high, and they will voluntarily do that, and they'll get paid to do that. So I think, and we're using AI to actually help us do that better. So I think having all these options on the table, having competition win out is going to be a win for everyone.
Yeah, I'll just double click on what's been already said. It's exactly right. You need to have flexibility. Storage could be the solution. It's going to be very locale specific. And so some areas, geothermal might be something that is feasible and others not so much. In the end, we're a business, right? So it has to make economic sense for us and for our customers. So that'll be the primary driver. That'll keep us honest. That's why we're not trying to rely on subsidies or government, subsidies to try and keep and what we argue artificially uphold something that may or may not last. The other piece of it is that technology will continue to develop in a positive way. So, for example, Congressman Downey mentioned the small nuclear reactors. Right now, we're still kind of watching that to see if that's something that could be feasible. We think there's a lot of promise there, and we think in a short amount of time that will be something that can be utilized in a positive and effective way. On using AI is part of the kind of solution of the very revolution that we're talking about. On the permitting, we've developed an AI tool that can dramatically increase the permitting for a lot of these facilities from weeks and months down to literally at least getting the applications ready in a matter of minutes, that you can at least start that process that took a lot of lawyers, people that kind of knew the arcane application process. You can reduce that down, and it goes beyond just energy applications for a myriad of other government applications. So we'll see that there'll be a growing and a faster growth of the technological solutions as well as the permitting challenges that are associated with that.
Right. Well, let's segue into something that was brought up, which is the fact that we can all acknowledge as a country we abandon nuclear, specifically fission, way too early. We got caught up in this emotional discussion about the fact that there are some bad failure modes and some byproducts that we struggle to deal with and we failed to look at the bigger picture, which is that currently fission is probably the lowest environmental impact energy generation technology that we have when you consider the total life cycle carbon emissions. So we've got this opportunity with recommissioning plants like 3 Mile Island. We've got an opportunity with small modular reactors. A lot of people are panicked by the fact that we're trying to talk about miniaturization of fission technology, but I point out to everyone who says that the Navy has been doing SMRs, for 50 years now. So this is not new technology. But what is new is that if we can kind of serialize the production of SMRs, we can maybe drive down the incremental cost of generation through fission, which is one of our chief impediments right now, is that when you layer on all the regulatory burden, fission is quite expensive, right? And most of that is regulation, and the fact that all these generation plants are essentially one-offs, are done not in a production environment with a production mentality, one at a time. So what role that fission and SMRs are going to play in solving this problem?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think nuclear, all forms of it, is going to be a big part of the solution. You're right, we neglected it for too long. A lot of that was regulatory. A lot of it, frankly, was tax policy in the states and the federal government that benefited some forms of clean energy, like renewables, over clean carbon-free nuclear power. That was fixed. And has now been ratified by Democratic and Republican majorities, so thank you for that. So let me talk about the Clinton nuclear power station in downstate Illinois. Just a few years ago, that plant was on the list for closure by us. Earlier this year, we signed an agreement with Meta PPA, and they're going to take all the electricity generated by that plant for 20 years. And so we could go to the 550 people who work at the plant and say, you're going to have a job here for 20 more years. So not only are we keeping that plant online, we're doing upgrades at the plant to generate more electricity. And we have an early site permit there from the NRC, which is, we can use it to look at placing a new nuclear reactor there, potentially an SMR, potentially an AP1000 or something like that at the site, so that you'll have that site running into the 2070s and potentially new nuclear development there, and you get the synergies of doing everything at the same site. You have the land, you have the transmission, you have the security, and you have community support already there, so they work hand in hand.
If I could just add to that, you can't underestimate just what a change this is, because as the Congressman noted, in the past, nuclear was literally untouchable. And when we announced our Constellation partnership last year, I was kind of bracing for this onslaught, particularly to kind of environmental groups, and there was not a peep. I mean, I think Jane Fonda tweeted something out. Who cares? But I think the American public on both sides of the ideological aisle has now recognized, one, that there is increasing demand for technology and for the great things that technology does, and the energy that powers that technology, and that nuclear and other types of energy are in fact safe, and that we're going to have to utilize these energies in order to continue, our economic growth. And so that's been a very positive development. That I grew up in the movies of like Silkwood and stuff like that. It was all negative. Russian culture were disappearing, and now we're finding it's very much a positive story. So the political construction is not good. It might have been their generation.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. I think, we brought this up with the Department of Navy already having some of this technology. This is a place where the federal government can really lean in, right? We have some of the best nuclear scientists in the world working in the United States on this subject. DOE has 25 national labs. I used to work in the office of the secretary there, and this is a place where the federal government can really think through how can we use the NRC to commercialize safely some of these R&D developments. Crusoe announced a 1.5 gigawatt partnership with Blue Energy in Port Victoria, Texas, right? And this is a company that takes shipbuilding yards that are no longer being used, refurbishes it for their nuclear product, right? That is some really amazing R&D effort that can only exist in the United States because of the expertise of our national labs. So when we think about all of the other approach and how there's been this turn in how we can use nuclear energy, it's really can be driven by the federal government and our expertise at DOW or DOD.
Well, speaking of the national labs, and speaking of nuclear, let's talk about fusion for a little bit because, as most everyone has heard now, recent developments have turned fusion from something that might possibly be occurring in the future at some point to something that will definitely be generating commercial electrons in our lifetime, which is incredibly exciting. I tell people all the time, please don't call it nuclear. I mean, we all know it is nuclear, right? But we've got all of this emotional and political baggage attached to the word nuclear. We'll call it fusion, clean fusion energy. But still, I mean, it's compared to fission, few of the failure modes, and a minimal amount of byproduct. And portable at a community scale that's very well suited to a data center. So, love your perspective, because I know you've got one of the most innovative partnerships on fusion that put electrons on, at least to your grid, sooner than anyone else. How's it going?
It's going well. We had Andy for bringing this facility in Constellation by 28, and I'm looking at 27. So it's happening faster than we anticipated. Hopefully,
That's Crane. That's right.
Okay.
So, yeah. So we're excited, and now that because of the positive experience and the way that's been going there, we're looking at other possibilities, around the country that could likewise be something that's now in the realm of possibility. And again, from a private company perspective, this is now also economical, because before one of the hurdles not only was a societal hurdle, but also economically, just wasn't something that a shareholder, company responsible for shareholders, that we could kind of feasibly, see in a feasible manner. Now we can. And as Andrew mentioned, Meta, other companies are likewise looking at the possibilities.
I think part of it too is workforce. We haven't talked too much about workforce yet today, but that's really important in a very specialized industry like nuclear. We're going to need to keep the existing fleet going so that you have people who can operate these reactors, whatever form of technology it is, who can build them. They're in demand all over the world, so we need to keep the industry robust here so that we have the talent here and we don't lose it to other countries.
Sure. Well, speaking of regulation, because we got a big win for fusion when we reauthorized the NRC and we're able to classify fusion reactors as accelerators and not in the same category as fission, because that's going to really catalyze that growth. That's, I think, a pretty rare occasion of Congress actually getting out in front and providing some of the guidance that needed to be done rather than having to scramble, after the fact and fix problems. What are the other things that you think Congress needs to do in terms of policies or regulations or lawmaking now to be able to solve these the problems with this fusion of energy and data centers?
I got my list right here.
I'm sure.
So it's funny because this field is moving so quickly, right? 2 years ago it was chips, this year it's power, next year it's workforce. And so as we're building out these data center sites, this will be a resurgence of blue collar jobs in rural America. In Abilene, Texas, there's 7,000 construction workers on the site right now. And these are highly skilled, highly paid trained construction workers. It's actually pretty cool. There's like school buses that chase them from different buildings so they can learn different types of trades. And the idea here is once Abilene is built, powered, energized, those folks will be ready to move on to Cheyenne, Wyoming, so on and so forth. And so when we talk about workforce development, there will be a shortage, particularly of construction workers. And so there's some small things that can be done, right? Making sure that trade certifications can be transferred in between states, ensuring that there's workforce development programs, which I know the Department of Labor, Office of Apprenticeships is looking at, offering federal grants and incentives to produce new workforce development, And it's not just construction workers, right? It's the whole energy pipeline. It's the supply chain pipeline. It's also, how to use AI responsibly and in place for humanities. I think it's so fascinating. I was in Wyoming a couple weeks ago speaking with a representative from rural Wyoming. Amazing representative, ran for office because she believes in education equity, PhD in education. And she looked at me and she said, there's AI in the classrooms and the kids are reading. And so, that is the workforce that we're talking about. It's not just construction, it's this whole, society training. And so I think some things that Congress can do is really dive into that piece. And that's what we're looking at in the next 18 months of workforce.
I was going to say, I want to double click on that. Now, in the tech field, for several years have been talking about the need for high skill tech employees. And that's a perennial issue, and that continues to be a challenge. But as Suzanna said, we're also looking now at a challenge when it comes to blue collar workers, when it comes to constructing the infrastructure that we need. Just electricians alone, I have to look back. I think the median age of most electricians in our country, we have about 200,000+, I believe, and I think the median age is well over 50. So you're going to see a huge drop off, well over a third are going to begin retiring, and we're going to need about 700,000 or so electricians alone to continue to build all these facilities that we're talking about. And so where is that training? How can we make that easier? These are high-paying jobs, but you obviously need to know what you're doing. One of the things that we're doing to try and meet that gap, both on the high end and on the blue-collar side, is working with our soon-to-be separating folks in the military. So we used to be physically on base on 14 bases. Now we do it all online, where we train active duty military personnel. Sorry, it's listed normally. Officers need to do fine. Where we train them in different, cloud computing, cyber, etc. They get a certificate. They can go to Meta. They can go to Microsoft. They can go to Google. Remember, but they then have a career, a new and very exciting and well-paying career after they separate from the military. And whether that can be on the construction side or it can be more on the tech side, that's just something that we're trying to invest in. There can be more support from the government, both the federal and the state and local side, to encourage that type of reskilling so that people can meet the demand that we have in our country for this infrastructure and technology. But
I'd say too, from a regulatory perspective, we need streamlining. We also need certainty in some areas. So there's certainty around permitting, certainty around interconnect, so connecting new resources to the grid, and our customers who are working it, they need certainty about the road. So for instance, there's a concept called co-location, of co-locating data centers at existing power plants in the region we operate in heavily, PJM. That's been something that's been up in the air for over a year now. FERC has finally said they're going to issue an order on that tomorrow. So hopefully we get some certainty on that. DOE has also been asking FERC to work on some nationwide interconnect. So getting the rules of the road at a certain point, it's not that you don't care what the rules are, but at a certain point, getting clarity on the rules can be just as important as the content of the rules themselves. So we can get going on some of this stuff, because the Chinese are waiting for them to figure this stuff out for a year and a half. They're just doing it still.
Yeah. All right, so I want to bring us back up to 30,000 feet here and kind of go first full circle to what we started this conversation talking about. The construction of all these data centers and the demand is going to play something, right? So an optimistic versus pessimistic case. So I want to ask our panel, which should we be? Should we be optimistic or pessimistic? Because pessimistically, you look at the projected data consumption of data centers, energy consumption of data centers, and you pair that with adoption of AI in the United States, and you get this exponential curve that's really, really frightening. That really makes the case that there's no way we can add enough generation to keep up with. On the other hand, it's become clear that each successive generation of chips is more energy efficient. Really, we've got an order of magnitude just in the last few years where current chips are 10 times more energy efficient for a given amount of compute. Data center construction has really advanced, where the data centers themselves are more efficient. particularly with their consumption of energy for cooling and for their consumption of water, as was brought up a little earlier. And the algorithms themselves, it's become increasingly clear that you might need a frontier model with billions of parameters to handle an initial query, but you can hand that query off to potentially a smaller model with only 100 million parameters or 10 million parameters to answer. If it's something specific, you say, oh, someone's looking for help writing a business plan. Okay, I've got a small that can do 99% as good a job, for 1% the number of weights, or, that equals 1% of the energy consumption for inference. So you pair all of those together, and you can make a case that even if adoption is exponential, the energy consumption is linear. So, and you pair that with all the different things we've been talking about, adding generation grid and using AI to manage load, and that we're going to be just fine. In fact, this is going to be a net gain for energy production in the United States. So, which is it? How do we navigate this quandary?
Personally, I'm an optimist. I think, to your point, it's a challenge that we have to tackle as a country, but it's a challenge that we can handle. We've handled big challenges in this country before, especially with the grid, and we can handle this one. I think it's important to focus on winning the AI race, but also important, as we kind of started off talking about, the benefits that AI can have for humanity, the benefits in healthcare and other things like that. I also think we have to keep Main Street, we have to keep consumers kind of at the top of mind. Affordability, I think, is a real concern, but I think, and you mentioned this earlier, Congressman, bringing more customers onto the system. A lot of the system is already built out and the costs are kind of fixed. So if we bring more customers onto the system, that can lower costs for everyone and spread it out. So I think because of this, we can have reliable electricity, we can have an abundant and affordable electricity for decades to come.
Yeah, I think this is a choice we have to make as a country, right? Are we going to be optimistic and meet the moment? I think about at the point that I have family members who are using ChatGPT to create Christmas gifts. Like, AI is not going anywhere, so let's meet the moment and have a really cool moment as a country, just like we did with the space race. I'll say I wasn't around then, but we put a man on the moon, and how much did America love that, right? And so I think there really is a great opportunity here to meet this moment, and obviously it comes with their challenges. No revolution doesn't, but it would be really cool if we were the first country to cure cancer. It would be amazing if we can use this technology to figure out where in our grid can we fix this to lower prices for consumers. And we can do that, and we have a solution to that. And clearly the private capital is there. That's why we're all sitting here. Clearly there's interest from the government. That's why you all convened us here. So I think it really is a choice that we have to make on, is this going to be an exciting moment that we take on as a country? And I think it is. I'm excited about it. So, Christmas gifts and everything.
Yeah, I'll add to what Susanna and Andrew said. There's no doubt I'm an optimist. If you look at history, Susanna mentioned the space race, look at World War II. Winston Churchill had this great expression: "You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted all responsibilities." So sometimes we screw up, and we own it, but eventually we get it right. And it's not just because of some dumb luck. It's because we have in place, we are a constitutional republic that has really talented people that care, and that, yes, we are the arms race treaties, no doubt about it. And we have to be very clear-eyed about those challenges. They don't have any of the guardrails or any of the moral, ethical, qualms that we might have when it comes to any number of issues, including technological use. But I think there's something that's very special about the American country, the American people, that we can rise to the occasion. Hopefully we make those decisions sooner than later, before making those mistakes, and kind of coming back on track. The space race, the Russians, put a monkey into the space before we did. World War II, we lost a few battles before we eventually won. So this is no different. I think if we are as thoughtful as we continue to be, now we are in the lead when it comes to technology, particularly with AI. Next is quantum, which is just around the bend. I think we can continue to be the lead. You just need to be thoughtful, open, transparent in our decision-making, and just very intentional about continuing to be the greatest democracy that it ever was. I think we can do that. I think now we're seeing with the leadership that we have in our government, that is very much possible because we have a very America First approach to things, new technology. That gives me great sense of confidence.
Well, I want to thank the panel for your expert opinions here. A really, I think, fascinating discussion. And I look forward to working with everyone at the table on these issues because I think it's very clear it's going to take all of us working together and pushing in the same direction to overcome some of these challenges and realize some of these benefits in the future. So please join me in thanking us. And I thank all of you for your interest in what I think are really important.
And thank Congressman for moderating this discussion and having an insightful and enlightening conversation. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And I'll give you a call on the in-depth thing.
Yeah.